Are we on the verge of seeing a red tidal wave in November? Well, joining us today to unseat an incumbent Democrat, actually Democrat Congressman Mark Pocan, is Republican candidate for the 2nd Congressional District in Wisconsin, Charity Berry. Charity, thank you so much for joining us today in the program.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So, Charity, I guess the first question that we normally ask candidate, why are you running? Why are you in this race specifically?
I'm running because I'm a patriotic American, and watching the way our country has been going the last couple of years, I felt very much led to jump in the race and step up and do something for the people of my home. I've lived here in the 2nd District my entire life, and I've lived under these Democratic leadership and watched the results of what that brings to our communities, and I'm excited for the opportunity to be able to change it this year.
Why should the constituents in your district retire Mark Pocan?
Mark Pocan is a self-proclaimed and proud Democratic Socialist. And, essentially, I know he's done some things for some different groups that people are glad that he's done. But essentially, all the policy that he makes tears away at the very fabric of our nation and what we've been founded on. And he has no respect for, capitalism and people's desire for freedoms and liberty.
Absolutely. We've had on the show before our Trevor Loudon, who's an anti-communist researcher and author, filmmaker, and he's actually discussed many times Mark Pocan and how he's one of the worst members of the House of Representatives. So it's good to see some opposition, and hopefully strong enough opposition to unseat him coming from his district. Well, hopefully it won't be his district for long, right?
Absolutely.
So, when it comes to Mark Pocan, what are some things that he's specifically done that you would say is the straw that's broken the camel's back in terms of he needs to go now? I mean, he probably needed to go long before this, but what more recently would you say has really solidified that as the course of action that should be taken?
I think one of the biggest things that has hit our nation as a whole, but every day I'm talking to people from the district, is our economy. And Mark Pocan was one of the biggest proponents for the Build Back Better plan, trying to tell everybody that it was paid for. He's going on national news networks, lying to the American people and robbing not only us but our kids and our grandkids with these policies and this shell game. And that's affecting everybody, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, but the entire country.
Why exactly would Build Back Better be bad for the constituents of the 2nd District of Wisconsin, or even all Wisconsinites in general?
Sure. I mean, it completely just tears away at it's just plain bad for the economy. I mean, all the different things in it, as far as, the different IRS stuff. And, I know we don't have a lot of time to go into all the details of it, but it is a horrible shell game that they're saying is going to pay for itself, but it's not. It counts on funding to come through later that won't. And it's sad to see the fact that a congressman would deceive his people that way.
Absolutely. It certainly would be a stranglehold on small businesses throughout the state. So what are your thoughts about Biden and the Democrats right now in Congress trying to retroactively push for the Equal Rights Amendment? This was a proposal back in the 70s that Congress at the time agreed to a deadline for its ratification. They failed to meet that deadline, and now some states have said that they've ratified it despite the deadline having passed. What are your thoughts about the Democrats trying to ram that into the Constitution after all these years?
I think the deadline was put there for a reason. The laws in our Constitution are there for a reason, and I think that if they believe so strongly that it would have the support, I think they should, start back over. But you can't ram something through like that and go back on what has already been established. The time has passed. The answer is no.
Absolutely. I believe even that the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was a supporter of the ERA, even she said the same thing, that at this point, it went through the process, it failed, we have to start backing up again, which didn't even make her happy, but even she was honest enough to acknowledge that before she passed. Turning to the subject of education. Where do you stand when it comes to things like Common Core and masks in public schools, and even in some places, children not even being allowed to go into public schools? Also, subjects such as homeschooling, and how in some states parents don't have the same kind of abilities that those in other states do have when it comes to the accessibility and ease of homeschooling because of certain laws in place.
Yeah, no, I think parents should have the right to educate at home. We had a big champion over the years here in Wisconsin that pushed for that, and I'm a very thankful product of homeschooling. And I got a good, solid education at home. As far as masks in school, I think it's really sad to see that, there were studies done in other countries about how the kids, they can't, so even if you're going to put them on adults, which obviously I don't agree in any medical mandates, but even if you're going to put them on adults, the kids' little diaphragms, they can't push past the mask. And there were studies done with those devastatingly low oxygen levels. You can't put a kid in a classroom and deprive them of oxygen and tell them to learn. It's not going to work. As far as on the federal level with education, a lot of the power of what goes on in our schools, such as, Common Core or things that people are seeing more recently with the critical theory, be it race or gender, that comes from the Department of Education. Mark Pocan himself has written into legislation that, the funding will come to improve our preschools as long as they implement that social emotional learning. That's not even K through 12. That's our 4-year-olds. And they should not have to be exposed to that stuff, but it's turning into a federal money game being pushed on our classrooms. And I believe that the power of the classroom and what is taught there should be brought out of DC and back to the local level and into the hands of the parents, because they should have the say over what's going on with their kids. In our district, we have had a huge push for school board members. So we're looking forward to what changes will happen in our school boards here on April 5th when those elections come around. Excuse me. But it's devastating. And even in the higher education levels, the American Families Plan is pushing for 2 years of not only, 3 and 4-year-olds in preschool, but also 2 years of free community college. There have been studies done across the years about how kids do academically better when they work their own way through college than if their parents pay for it. So the Biden administration is seeing the fact that our academia level is falling in our kids, and they're just throwing money at it, and it's going to make the problem worse. What we need is to, incentivize excellence in academic and trade or apprenticeship programs, and not just keep giving kids free stuff that they will end up in the long run not appreciating as much as if they had hands-on working experience or had to work for what they had. It's what America's all about.
Absolutely. Of course, you mentioned many of the problems coming from the Biden administration. Do you think America would be better off without the Department of Education? And we saw President Ronald Reagan when he was campaigning back in 1980. He promised to get rid of the Department of Education. Of course, that sadly didn't happen. But even today in Congress, Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky, he's introduced a bill to abolish the Department of Education. Would you stand with someone like Representative Massie to abolish the Department of Education?
I have not specifically read that particular bill, but I am definitely in favor of the federal government getting out of the way of our kids' education and abolishing that Department of Education, if that's something that we can do.
Absolutely, great.
But even if something like that wouldn't pass, they're using the funds coming through it as a manipulation, and we can change that course, even if they say you can't abolish the department.
Absolutely. In fact, that's sort of what we saw in 2009 when Common Core was first being rolled out. It didn't come officially from the Department of Education. It came from the National Governors Associations and other organizations. But the bills that Congress passed back in 2009 that President Obama signed into law, they tied federal transportation funds with states signing on to the Common Core program. So they essentially bullied states, or coerced them rather, into following Common Core, even though it was not officially a program of the Department of Education, but they were coercing states to adopt it.
Yeah, and like Education Secretary Cardona was talking about how the budget for the Department of Education is $103 billion, I believe, for this year, complemented by other mandated things from the American Jobs and American Families Plan. Well, if you go look at the American Jobs and American Families Plan, that's almost an additional $500 billion. So they're saying in the budget it's only $103 billion, but in reality it's almost $6.
And speaking of Secretary Cardona, he really would refuse to answer questions during his committee testimony hearings whether he should be confirmed for that position regarding his stance on whether so-called transgender men, that is, men who identify as being women, should be in sports teams with women, with biological women, of course. So where do you stand on Cardona's lack of clarity on that, and then eventually even going on to push for the whole transgender agenda in the public schools? Should transgendered men, so-called, be in the same leagues and locker rooms and even bathrooms, perhaps, as biological women?
No, they shouldn't. And I mean, you need to look no further than Bruce Jenner saying that shouldn't be either. You can't even just say, well, no, I don't agree with their lifestyle, so then of course I'm going to try to push them out. But no, even people in that lifestyle say, no, there is an advantage there. It's not fair. So it's turning into a women's rights issue that people all across the political spectrum are upset about. Yeah, and Mark Pocan is a huge proponent for trans and gay rights.
Yes, of course. And we've just seen how in the Olympics, various medals have even gone to people who weren't born women in the women's category. So I'll just leave it at that. Now, with regards to what's happening right now in the Ukraine and Russia and Europe and so forth, do you approve of President Biden's decision to send more U.S. forces into the neighboring countries around Ukraine that are NATO members, or do you see that as potentially making an already an already hot conflict even more unstable, potentially dragging the U.S. into another war in Europe?
It does seem pretty questionable, doesn't it? A lot has happened over the last even just 12 hours there in Ukraine. And I think that a lot of that is caused by the fact of how Biden handled the pullout of Afghanistan. And he's completely undermined our position internationally by how he chose to deal with that situation and the devastating things that happened there, leaving all the equipment there, those 13 lives that were lost, and I'm sure countless more, the Americans stuck there in Afghanistan. I've talked to so many vets that are, wondering why they went over there if it was just going to end that way. And our veterans shouldn't be feeling that way. So, and I think that the fact that the Biden administration has handled things like Afghanistan in the manner that he has jeopardized not only our national security, but people all across the world, be it Ukraine, be it Taiwan. It's a terrifying position of national security that he has put us in.
Absolutely, definitely. We're seeing Russia and China move in ways that we haven't seen in years and if not decades under this administration. Are there any particular bills in Congress that are there right now, perhaps, that you would like to co-sponsor if elected, or are there any bills that you're thinking about that perhaps aren't in Congress that you would like to see passed and eventually signed into law?
Sure. I think, I don't have a lot to say, obviously, what's going on in there now, but I'm very excited about the opportunity to be able to fight for our kids through the education programs. And stop incentivizing indoctrination and equity, and push for academia and merit-based education. There are ideas that I know our time's running out about election integrity and being able to not try to federalize those elections as Mark Pocan has pushed for, but buttress the states' rights and bring accountability to federal elections it's being torn away at. I mean, that has been the top issue among people in my district. Education a close second, but election integrity has been a huge concern, especially here in Wisconsin.
Absolutely. And lastly, where can those who are watching who want to learn more about your campaign or support you, where can they go? Where would you direct them?
Absolutely. My website is charityberry, and that's BARRY for Congress.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charity Berry for Congress and other social media forms as well. But you can go on that website. You can sign up to volunteer if you live in the district or donate. Also reach out to me through that contact page that comes right to my email.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck in your race. And of course, God bless you and take care.